So we're live? Yeah, there we go. Now we're live.
We are live.
This was awesome. Like, we've done a whole podcast before we even started recording. Because I don't know what I'm doing. So just let's just set the stage. Apparently Zoom does not allow for unlimited cloud recording, which I did know that. But we are on Kelly Yale's recording technology because Eric Levin messed up. So thank you for bearing through the last 10 minutes, Kelly Yale.
It's no issue. You know, it's funny when we're in mortgage technology, we try to not own up all the time to the fact
who's in mortgage technology.
I mean, maybe not. Maybe I just am. Maybe that's just me. We used to have stuff happen all the time during our trainings, or we would go to do a demo and nothing would work, and I would be like, no, we really know what we're doing in tech. I promise, but you know, it happens.
Well, it's like those demos that I'm on sometimes where it really is that the internet stinks, but yet that doesn't sound like a good excuse for the reason why things are a little bit slow right now.
Yeah.
It's just the worst when you're like, hey, looks like my internet connection's a little low at the moment because I'm at my house or because I'm on vacation. Nobody cares. Well, thank you for being flexible, Kelly. And yeah, apparently I am in tech, yet I don't know how to use Zoom effectively. I think I told you. So we're doing this. You and I are recording this, and then it'll go live in a few days during Pod-A-Palooza 24 with our friend Fabi, who leads those efforts. Have you ever been a part of Pod-A-Palooza?
I have never been part of Pod-A-Palooza.
Well, welcome to Pod-A-Palooza. This is my first experience with. So you did when I invited you to the Walk podcast. Who knew that you were going to get to double dip?
I did not, but I had been to a lot of Lollapaloozas, so I don't know if we want to go down those routes and kind of talk about those experiences, but I mean, we can, but I feel like Pod-A-Palooza is probably more on brand and message for this.
Maybe, although with the way that I started this off, we might as well be on psychedelics.
I mean, I never took psychedelics. I could never take psychedelic. Well, first of all, I just can't in general, because if a tree waves at me, that's going to be the end of my time. So that's not for Kelly Yale to see.
I think it's a different podcast, but there are different types of psychedelics that I don't think make the trees wave at you depending upon how much you take.
I mean,
not that I would know.
What's funny is we all have these note takers now, right? So we go into these meetings and our note taker kind of is going to listen to the meeting and it's going to give us our notes back. But when you're like people like us, where you feel very comfortable and you know people and you're kind of making jokes left and right. A few months ago, I was talking to someone and I just made some joke about meth, and it literally came over in the notes. Kelly and the client discussed meth use, and I was like, no, we did not. That is not what happened. So it's pretty
that went straight to the CIA.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Hey, I'm guessing that the money that's being raised for Pod-A-Palooza is probably for a cause that has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. Actually, I do know that Fabi and his team do some really good work to raise money around ending poverty throughout the country. So thanks for joining me on the podcast, on the Walk podcast, but also being a part of Pod-A-Palooza. And thank you for Fabi and his team for inviting me and us to be a part of it. Okay, look, you and I have spoken a couple times recently. How we've never spoken that much before is beyond me, but I've really enjoyed kind of our back and forth about a lot of things. So you've got huge experience both in marketing and technology and sort of how they live together in this ecosystem of, real estate finance. And then I come from business development and then turned that into a tech solution. And you and I have talked a lot about sort of how that's evolved within companies, within this industry, where things are working well, where things are challenged. This is just a free-flowing Kelly Yale mind dump that I'm looking forward to. But I'm curious to get your take. Let's start off this way. When did you start impacting marketing and tech? And then how do you think it's evolved positively and maybe stagnantly since then across the industry? Is that a broad enough question?
Sure, it's super broad. I'm going to start with, I was born on April 19th. No, I my background was two separate things. One is that I built online communities for companies back well before there was social media. And then I had started a social media marketing and digital marketing agency, which did really well here in Charlotte. And I ended up taking on sort of a branch of a mortgage company that was here and local. And I was so perplexed by the fact that this industry in 2012 just didn't have marketing. And then I was even more perplexed when I started learning that, like, while this was more or less a franchise, the franchisees had no real guidance as to how to grow, no brand specific strategy, no digital footprint. And I was like, oh gosh, if we do A, B, and C, it'll equal D. It's gonna be great. And then we did that and it worked and it was awesome. And then I realized that, when you're in a sort of a franchisee model and one of your franchises is doing really, really well, it hurts the other people in your region, right? A real estate agent who's going to go through this amazing collaborative, high communication, high touch solution with our branch is not going to understand the next time they do business with the same company, but a different branch. And so then I was like, well, gosh, we need the same kind of systems. And this is before, look, Total Expert, Be in Touch, and our CRM started the exact same year. So if you can imagine how we were all babies in the industry.
Yep.
But I had a really special sort of assignment, right? Which was, I saw the way that sales and marketing could align and could translate that into technology. And so whereas other CRMs had to sell seats, right? And their whole thing was like, here's a seat to the technology. My job was, here's how we can curate these systems to work in tandem in order to provide this extremely thoughtful relationship with your realtors, one that isn't based on you saying, hey, it's Friday, here's a chicken recipe and the rates. Right. One that was based on, how do we grow our collaboration long term? How do I help you build your business? What technology gifts can I give you that won't be something you have to pay for? And how do we take that to the next level? And then don't tell anybody I said this, but while loan officers were my customers, I focused only on the home buyers, right? Mm-hmm. And not in a short-term transactional way. Back in 2014, if you look up anything I was talking about back in, not that I've stopped being as a disruptor, but certainly was a disruptor for my time in 2014, I was always talking about relationships, the short-sightedness of transactions, the long-term strategy of relationship curation. So I kind of got into it in that way. I think the special sauce for us was that we really genuinely understood sales behavior, loan officer behavior. Then we understood marketing, how to position those loan officers in the best possible way, and then how to automate things that this loan officer shouldn't and didn't want to do. Systems should support sales, not ask sales to learn something after another thing after another thing. They're going to get tech exhaustion, and we're going to end up where we are right now.
Okay, so that was awesome. Let's back up, though.
Sure.
2012, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Back then, marketing, and maybe add to this or tell me if I'm wrong, marketing, at least the way this industry, I think, maybe saw marketing was the churning your servicing portfolio, right? It was like sending out some mailers that were based upon a data point from your servicing portfolio, which may or may not create value for the originator. It actually could compete with the originator, quite frankly, depending upon what company you're with, what type of company you're with, right? I mean, that's true.
I would argue that that's still being done.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so hold that. Secondly, you use the word collaborate. Mm-hmm. I was in a meeting this morning, local, and was asked to be on this advisory board for talent attraction in the county that I live in, right? So there's a lot of money that's flown into this, that's come into this county post-COVID. We're one of those little towns, right? Well, Hickory, you're in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And in the room were the biggest industries. A lot of healthcare, but for Hickory, North Carolina, a lot of that is what? It's furniture manufacturing, it's hosiery manufacturing. And so one of the things that they were saying was, and it was just a very honest conversation about that, there's a line of demarcation when it comes to collaboration because they're generally competing for the same talent. Okay, that's fair. Well, the mortgage industry, especially within IMBs, that's been a challenge within the same company. Yeah. Right. And that's sort of what you're talking about. So then that brings me to thoughts about, have we really progressed when it comes to how we view marketing? And have we really progressed when it comes to how we collaborate to create multiples for the entire organization?
I'm going to assume that you don't know that I wrote a book in January. And it's probably because I just haven't told you that I did. But not to plug a book, because that's not what I'm doing at all.
Plug the book.
But I literally wrote a book that is absolutely for the C-suite of IMBs. And it's called Mastering Mortgage Marketing. And it literally is saying to them, this idea, this premise that we can sell the salesman into coming and working here and telling them they can have the world and they can do whatever they want and all this kind of stuff, it has to stop if we want to scale companies past 2025. There's this concept of like super individualism with every single entrepreneur and all this kind of thing. It's what has clogged up most of these companies because they've had to recruit people and promise them that they can still use the same tech stack, they can still use the same CRM, and then they end up with 8 CRMs at one company. They end up with 4 POSs. They end up with vendor fatigue to the hilt. But the hardest part too is what recruiters and C-suite don't understand when they're recruiting this talent in and they're making these over promises is that they already have a taxed marketing department. They already have a taxed tech department that's now going to be asked even more. Plus, most companies are too afraid to set down standards, right? So somebody will come in and say, well, this is my brand. And we're like, oh, absolutely. You should totally be the crazy panda loan club. That sounds like a normal name and we'll let you do that. Well, the problem is that's not compliant. So now you're putting your compliance person in a bad situation. You're putting your licensing people in bad situations. You're putting your marketing people in conversations when somebody just starts and just onboards where they're like, here's the list of things I was promised. And it just doesn't work. And for a huge part of the book is trying to get one simple concept across, which is, if you think that a marketing department is a glorified flyer machine, then you should exit industry now. Because I can tell you without any hesitation that one highly skilled marketing specialist is going to bring every bit as much value as 500 loan officers will in 2025. And if you don't know that, then you're not running it right.
I feel like it's happening a little bit, at least with some, but it's happening very slow. So even for the ones that it seems to be happening with, where it's clear that they're making investments in really strong marketing and digital marketing leadership and teams, they're involving them with a seat at the table in a different way than maybe they've had a seat at the table over the years. But even those companies that seem to be, and we're not going to name names, but even those companies that seem to be investing in it and making the effort, I know what I think, but why do you think they still continue to move so slow? I hate to use the word mandate. I'm sure you'd be happy to use the word mandate. This is what we use. This is how we do it. You either do it or you go somewhere else and do it differently. Why are we so slow to create this consistent and predictable enterprise methodology that you're sort of talking about?
Just this week alone, I've had 2 call outs on LinkedIn. And they've said the exact same thing, which is like, oh, you got to follow Kelly Yale. She'll tell it as it is, or she'll tell the truth, or like whatever this is. And I don't know why that is such a rarefied thing, but I'm happy to tell you why I think it is. You have salespeople who are really good at selling mortgages, become branch managers, become regional managers, become C-suite leadership. But at no time did we start talking about, hey, here's how to run an effective business, P&L. Here's how you structure a really good business. Instead, we kind of just climb the ranks. At no time does someone bring a business specialist in. At no time do we hire a CEO from outside the mortgage industry to run it like a business. And so what we're doing all the time is we're having ex-mortgage salespeople sell current mortgage salespeople on working at a company. A lot of C-suite doesn't actually really understand. They haven't produced maybe in 3, 4, 5, 10 years. They don't use the current tech stack that is there. They can't speak to it, right? They can say, oh, we have this and this, but they can't put themselves in the driver's seat. We don't offer onboarding strategy and transition strategy. And so we have all these different things that we do when we bring this talent in. But why do we focus so much effort on selling the salespeople? Why do we recruit constantly when we don't have the foundation of our business built out? I don't understand that, and I see it constantly. We'll be brought into a company and it's like, we want you to help us with this little thing here. And I'm like, well, we absolutely can. The problem is I can't build that on no foundation. And so there is this concept that sales is the end all be all, followed by ops, maybe then marketing. Marketing and tech might fit like underneath there, but that's not the world we live in. It isn't even close to the world we live in anymore. But you can't make everyone understand that because you have to wind back so much in that situation. One, we have to run this thing like a business. We got to make strategic business decisions before we are out there trying to fish for more people. And then the second part of it is technology and marketing not only should have a seat at the table, but at this point, they should have one of the loudest voices in the room. Because what you need to be at this point is at least equal in tech and marketing and sales. Because what we're starting to see and have been seeing, and if certain companies have definitely taken the reins on that, we're starting to understand that technology is not something that helps. Technology is not something that might be good for our business. Technology is here to do it. And I think there's some missing component here. I think it's mostly because tech companies trying to sell technology like this is just an add-on, and I think mortgage people still want to feel very comfortable that the world is going to be cyclical like it always has been. Like we're going to go back to 2017, and we're not. And so we can all keep doing this spin, but we've been spinning for a couple of years now on the same conversations.
So then is it really then the risk of whoever decides to do what you just said? Hey, you know what? We're going to make a strategic decision. We're going to run this like a business and not just a mortgage company. But the first one to do that is going to have an attrition problem, probably. Like you have the potential of going through some short-term pain before you then get to the other side. So is maybe one of the answers about why do we keep looking to throw volume on top of the problem is that it at least kicks the can a little bit while we're waiting for market conditions. And by the way, I'm just spitballing here, right? But there's got to be a reason. It was like a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with someone about, which I want to get to with you, but let's table it. And that is loan officer compensation. The formula has changed, but somehow loan officer compensation hasn't really changed that much. Why? Well, and so the answer, everybody knew that when we look at the cost to originate, that's a big component of it. Well, because if XYZ company decides to cut their loan officer compensation without adding other things that help the loan officers do more volume, that's totally tangible, you're going to lose all those LOs. So is that part of the problem? Not the compensation, but the risk of, I'm going to make the changes Kelly just said, but it's not going to be that easy. I'm going to set this thing on fire for a minute before I get to the other side.
I mean, I think we are going to see the answer to that unfold in 2025. I really and truly believe that but I don't know how much of it is spin and how much of it is real, right? So if you're an ex-producer who is in C-suite, then you absolutely believe that everyone is going to leave if we talk about cutting comp, if we talk about anything changing, right? Because that's how your mind works. I love to use this analogy, and it's dumb, and I'm going to tell you it's dumb before I start, right? But if I was going to open a muffin shop, and I was really good at making muffins, but I didn't really want to have customers come in. And I hired like 10 different salespeople to bring big baskets in, and they were going to go out and sell the muffins at different offices, right? Well, that would be the model. And what we do in mortgage is we say, we're going to do this. And then the salespeople come in, and I'm like, hey, where's your basket? Oh, I don't do baskets. I'm only going to bring a wagon. Okay. And I also don't like those kinds of muffins. Do you want us to make different kinds of muffins? Yeah, I want different muffins. I'm special and I want them different. And so make these muffins for me, do this for me. I'm not going to do it the way that you want me to do it because I've got my own way of doing it. And at what point is this a feasible situation for a business owner, right? I can't have every single salesperson doing their own thing and still expect that my brand is going to be cohesive, that I'm going to be able to run this business the way I want to run it. And it can be as collaborative as you want. But if my salespeople are dictating for me how my business is to be run, and I'm scared to say no because then they won't work for me anymore, what kind of a relationship is that?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe I tend to look at it differently. I've never sold a loan in my life. I don't have an NMLS. I've always looked at it as a disruptor, as an outsider. I've certainly been treated that way for the whole time I've been here because people are like, you don't get it. And I'm like, could it possibly be that I do get it a little bit? Because in my estimation, the person who's going to be the most successful moving forward is somebody who says, I want to create a company that is different. I want to have a company that serves loan officers. I don't want to have a company that just says yes to everything, because in that situation, I'm going to blow out the cost of manufacturing a loan, the kind of teams that I want to hire, the talent that I want to hire. I want to be able to create something that people are attracted to and not feel like I can't make decisions for my own company without fearing that people are going to leave because they're unhappy with the fact that we're upgrading what we do.
Right. Right. So why do you think it's 25?
I don't think I think right now, if you have clawed and scrapped your way to 25, I have nothing but respect for companies that have done it. It's been really, really hard. And I certainly am sympathetic to the situation that people have been in. But I think that as people are doing the books and the strategies for 25, I think that people are starting to understand that if they're not ready to play the big game, that they are not going to. So you're people who are taking loan applications in a legal pad still, the people who are running their business out of an Excel spreadsheet, that cannot continue because maybe you have low rates if you're using that Excel spreadsheet, maybe. But how can you compete with the kind of amazing consumer experience that other companies are providing? The companies who've leaned into data, who understand their customer well before they have a conversation with them, who understand that it's not just smile and dial anymore. There are significant changes that are happening, whether we like to talk about it out loud or not. There are significant changes happening. And once rates go down, you're going to see a lot of different players in the market because a lot of people have been building and building and building for that day. There's companies like Rocket, like Better, people who have been thinking about the how for a really long time. Companies that I would argue are almost more tech companies who do mortgages than they are mortgage companies with good tech. Mm-hmm. And tech is sort of this strange enemy word, kind of like AI, right? AI is coming to get our jobs and the robots are coming to get us. And so tech can be a fatiguing word to people in leadership and to even salespeople. because no one has ever took the time to create systems for them that were aligned, that were easy to use, and that served them. And so many people don't even believe such a thing exists. And they've probably been burned time and time again by different companies. And I get it. I would have the same fatigue if I were running a mortgage company that probably most of them do, which is I'm not a tech expert. I don't know how to make these decisions. I don't even know if I have a point person who understands how to deploy this strategy that this tech company wants. I don't understand how data is going to be revolutionary to what I do. And I don't really understand how to go after segments of audiences using data that are going to be really important opportunities for our company and for loan officers. And so I feel like that there's enough of an understanding gap and enough of a growth gap that in Q1, and especially if you don't get lower rates in Q2, I think people are not going to be able to survive.
And when you say people, though, you mean companies.
Companies, yeah, companies.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been happening slowly already. I mean, we would all agree. There was some little consolidation pop there for a little while, then it slowed down. Then I think there was hope that rates were going to adjust more than they did. They actually went up a little bit, and so we're starting to see a little bit of that again. Everything that you just said also relates to another question I was going to ask you, but I think you kind of already answered it, which was the challenges that I've seen so long, and now that we've been in SaaS now for a little while, we see it from our own perspective and not just like a third-party consulting type perspective, and that is the challenges that it exists for a company to gain adoption with platforms that they believed in at some point. So it's that they did their due diligence, they agree that this is something that's going to help us, and then they flip the switch, go, and then adoption is 2%, 4%, 5%, if you're lucky in some cases. Where do you think the biggest challenges exist between making the decision about something that's going to create value, the implementation, and then ultimately the adoption? Is it just up to the partner, meaning the third party, or is there something broken with the enterprise that has chosen that particular solution, whether it be marketing, technology, you name it?
So my father was a salesman. I'm a natural salesman. I'm not in sales. Why am I not in sales? I refuse to sell anything that I don't 1000% believe is going to be amazing for the person that I'm selling it to. But if you think that what goes on in mortgage tech, you're out of your mind. So if I had spent the past 10 years being oversold and underdelivered with almost every single platform, I wouldn't believe it either. And when you are constantly shifting the different things that you can use and listening to people and going down paths, and those paths don't end up working out, it is very understandable to me why people don't want to change or want to acclimate to a new thing or want to learn something new. And honestly, it's not always easy to understand how to use technology. And I would even argue sometimes it's horrendously difficult to understand how to use some of these technologies. If I would have been of that mindset in 2014, I would never have had the success that I had. I worked on the opposite side of it, which is instead of asking loan officers to learn 7 technologies and God forbid have to teach those technologies to their team, to realtors, to anybody, right? Because that's what we do. We go, hey, we've got this great thing and it's going to work well for your realtors. And so here's what I need. We're going to kick it off. You're going to have no training. You're going to have quasi training. You're going to have to learn it, ingest it, and be able to reteach it to your realtor. Come on. That is incredibly hard to do. And so that's why you get that. Instead of that, what I've never understood about this industry is how we weren't aligning everything 7 years ago. If you are creating systems for loan officers that they want to use, the only concentration you should have is we've got 7 platforms, but we're going to put it in one platform. And we're going to introduce each of these technologies at the correct time to the correct human being on your behalf. And if you have something that the realtor can use, it should be the system's job to introduce it correctly and to give them the high level of why it should work. If you're going to use an app for, let's say you're going to use a POS, that should be super easy to use, and it should go directly into your CRM and your LOS. There should be automated workflows that introduce different technologies that the consumer may need to use. But none of that should be directed by the loan officer. It should be the job of the main system to do that, right? And so instead of asking loan officers to know and be able to understand all these technologies, why not ask them to understand one? And why not simplify that interface to say, good morning, Eric. How are you today? We've got 7 loan opportunities and 15 relationship opportunities for you today. And we would like you to do the following things, because we know if you do these things, you're going to get at least 5 of these deals to close. Can we show you what that looks like? We don't aspire to that. We don't change the conversation. We don't demand that kind of simplified strategy from our tech vendors. And so we get what we get, which is, oh, good, we got another person who says they're really good at data. Oh, good, another person who says they're really good at AI. We'll hire the AI people, and they'll come in and they'll be able to implement this for us, and hopefully people will come to the training. How is that going to be something that's going to be scalable?
Right.
That is what I don't understand.
So why hasn't a tech company, why hasn't Amazon entered the space?
I don't know. I mean, hey, also, if you're entering the space, Amazon, my name is Kelly Yale. No, I genuinely don't know the answer to that. I would only assume it's coming. It's why I usually tell people that they need to have a company that they really believe in for the next 5 years, especially a company that is, I think that we've got 5 years in front of us that are going to be interesting, and I don't think we can possibly predict what happens after that. I think every year is going to shift so hard that I just feel like the big players are just waiting, right? I don't know. I would have only assumed that Amazon is in the space already, that they're already devoting resources to it. I happen to have an NDA where I can't say something that I would say, but I know enough to know that, there are definitely people talking to Amazon about things. Mm-hmm. And that's more on the real estate side, but think about it. I mean, if you really think about it, you work in the world of data. My life was data curation for many years. And by data curation and data manipulation, what I mean is, can I look at millions of opportunities and understand the market and create segmentation where I can drive opportunity through that, right? But if you think about Amazon, so here's Amazon, they know everything. Right? Not only do we all have little devices in our home, but they see the way that you're buying, right? So if you start a baby registry, what does Amazon know? Well, hey, this person's currently renting, they're having a baby. Guess how we can sell this loan? Mm-hmm. So if you think about your big data houses, right? I don't understand why Amazon's not in the game. Maybe it's because they're just making so much money doing everything else.
Or it's just it's a pain in the ass business.
It is not an easy business. It
right.
is not. I have no problem telling you I'm a different person than when I entered it, and I used to just be like so Pollyanna and such a cheerleader, right? Like coming in and just being like, this is going to be great. And we're all going to work on the same team. And it's just going to be this family and all this kind of stuff. And I really, really believed that for a long time. And then it wasn't until I started understanding like the machine and the politics and the kinds of stuff that, can happen. I mean, I've watched companies blow through $100 million budgets on tech and give me like serious grief for like $100,000 contract. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's like, but you just burned a pile of money right there. And so, we all have these experiences that have collectively sort of made us, I don't know, it made me a little harder. I'll be honest with you, Eric. It is definitely, I've kind of thought about it because I look around, I have so many friends in the industry, right? We all do. And all I want is for like them to catch a win. I always think about it like, God, if we could just get a win after a couple of years of this, if we could just get a win. And I think, throw yourself in the boat, bud. Like you need a win too. You've also been through the same experience that everybody has.
So, I've been in this business in some capacity. I've never originated. I've never had an NMLS ID. I've never worked for a mortgage company as an employee. I've always been, third party. Personally, I think that gives me a perspective that others just don't have that have been in the industry. I get to get opinions across companies, different models, different channels, and those are just all honest comments that are coming from those people at those companies. And I get to sort of absorb all of it and then push it back in some sort of consultation when needed. But I remember a long time ago, the conversation had already started that loan officers are going to be replaced. We're just not going to need loan officers anymore. It's going to be fully automated. It's going to be push button, get mortgage, for lack of a better quote. That didn't happen. That hasn't happened. Certainly market share has changed a little bit, but it hasn't been dramatic. What does the loan officer at an IMB that's making 125 basis points today, what does that LO look like 3 years from now?
I mean, it's an excellent question. And I think it truly depends on which IMB you work for.
Okay, forget IMB. Let's say, because that's fair. When I said it, I thought maybe I shouldn't have said it. So just at scale, a loan originator, what does that look like 3 years from now versus what it looks like today?
It's so funny. When I entered the industry, I used to make the same joke because I was in digital and social marketing, right? So like my life was always looking 5 years ahead. And when I entered into the industry, I realized we were 5 years behind. And I used to always say, like, there's a 10-year gap. And now 10 years later, I see that gap as almost the same, but at least there's so many more conversations about catching up, right? And so when you think about, like, when I think 5 years ahead, when I think 3 years ahead, the thing that I am looking for, and if I were starting a mortgage company, what I would want from my salespeople, I don't ever look at this and go, oh, the loan officers are a thing of the past. Like, here comes technology to take over. I don't look at it like that at all. I think, how do we find the best people who truly care about doing right by other people, who are going to really be there for someone when they're going through a really complicated financial transaction, and giving them guidance and solutions around that? I believe in 3 years, you will have so much more of a hybrid, right? That people will be able to, in 3 years, somebody's going to be able to ask any platform, I want to have the best rate and the best solution for my mortgage. Where do I go? Mm-hmm. And so how do you show up in that situation? Hopefully your brand is strong enough, and hopefully your reputation is strong enough that whatever they're searching with says, this is really a solution for you. There's going to be clarity. I think that is the thing that technology brings that people are not really prepared for. If you think about a mortgage, right? We pay somebody to guide us because it is insanely complicated. Mm-hmm. There's so many variables. In a world 3 years from now, think about how much less complicated that is to ingest, how much more information they can have at the ready, how much easier things can be explained to them. And so what we need from the loan officers in that scenario, right, is be a relationship creator, because tech can only do but so much. Can a tech company buy tons and tons and tons of data, and can they analyze all that data for opportunities? Of course. But if I get an Amazon mortgage, I'm going to get what I pay for. If I really want to understand how to do this in the healthiest and best way with a professional, I'm going to want to choose somebody like that. And so that, to me, is really where the growth strategy is for LOs. In fact, I just wrote something today that said the value of a loan officer truly is going to be in what relationships they create around them, and then what relationships they continue to curate within the database they built, and keep building that database out. And hopefully you work for a company that is smart enough to understand that they also need to give you opportunity after opportunity.
Yeah. Look, I'm looking at the data that we invest in and the intelligence that we're curating. And it's dancing on AI. AI is slippery, right? Like lots of people like to say AI, and it's really, it's really kind of hand waving. That doesn't mean it's not really valuable, curated information. I mean, it just might not be AI. But I look at that and I think about the things that originators have access to today, either in a total crappy static Excel spreadsheet form or in a true SaaS platform that can guide, that they didn't have access to several years ago. And that is all of the data and intelligence that their companies had access to. It's basically a servicing portfolio across the entire country, every transaction done by every NMLS ID. So not only are you in a position, potentially, if you know what to do and know what to use, I went the wrong way, to basically sort of turn yourself into a relationship-based consumer direct platform.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
If we only looked at it like that, right? But how? How do you take it? Like, that's the kind of change that I don't think can happen. And so that's where I think the IMB struggle for 2025 is, right? If we're constantly seeking the approval of the whole C-suite and all the salespeople to please, can we change? Please, can we adapt? Please, can we do this? I don't see how you win that race, right? Because, to your point, and which I'm not, look, I work with myriad, different vendors like yours, like different SaaS platforms.
Yep.
But the way I see my relationship with you, so let's say I'm the chief innovation officer of a IMB, right? And I want to have a great tech stack and I want to bring you in. The last thing I want to make you is a to-do. And that is what vendors currently are at mortgage companies. Hey, here's something you can use. Here's something it does. You can opt into finding this here. If you sign in, you can run this report and all this kind of thing, right? But instead, if you have somebody who understands the way that the loan officer thinks and the activities that they do every day, right? If I'm thinking of how to do that in a smart way, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to need you to make better relationships with your real estate agents this year. And here's what I can tell you. Here in the Charlotte metro area, especially around the area that you're in, here's exactly who this realtor has worked with. Even though they work with you, they gave 6 loans to this person and 4 loans to this person. And they're working with this title company and this title company. Here's how they are. But they had a slowdown between September and December. Now is a great time to have a conversation with them. Also, when you're having that conversation, here's their social media so that you can warm up the conversation. And here's how you can tell them what success looks like for them in the next 30 days and 60 days if they choose to work with you. But don't go in and sledgehammer them with all of this. Instead, you walk in and you say, hey, Eric, thanks so much for having lunch with me. Tell me about what's been going on with your kids. I know you have one that's going to college. What's that been like? I know that you want to have a different way of looking at your business this year. You guys had a terrible last year with all these NAR rulings. Everything is all over the place for you. I don't want to be your loan officer. I want to literally be your friend. And I want us to work together so that we have a reciprocal relationship. It's my job to show up with a pre-approved buyer for you, just like it's your job to show up with a referral for me. And that should be a one-to-one. And I'm dedicated to doing that. I'm dedicated to helping you understand how our technology works, because we're still going to have higher level tech because we have higher level data in mortgage than they have the possibility of getting in real estate. And who's going to create this collaboration space between the loan officer and the realtor where they have the data that they need in order to convert the leads that they get together? You don't see a lot of that. And so it really ends up being the architect's job to take all these amazing ideas and this amazing AI and all of these things, but still guide that loan officer to be able to sell a relationship easier, faster, and better.
Yeah, look, totally agree. I mean, we come from the perspective, we never set out to be a data provider. As a matter of fact, I can remember the first time that we looked at what one of those data dumps looked like and how expensive they were. This is a long time ago. before we invested in any of the data. And I remember a regional manager showing me this just insane ream of paper with all of this information on it. And he was so excited about it. And so I said, so show me what you're going to do with that. And he was explaining how he was parsing out the data to start to make targeted calls to either agents or possible recruits. Made tons of sense. So I said, well, have you started your outreach yet? And he goes, no, I'm about to. Like, I've just about got it dialed in to where I've got all the information organized in a way where I can start to make those phone calls. And I said, okay, great. So when did you purchase this data? It was like 3 months ago. So, I mean, he's now about to make engagement calls off of data that's 3 months old, and he might as well just start over again. But that was an aha moment for us of, okay, well, wait a minute. If we can ingest the data in such a way that is presented that helps you tell a story, like it's exactly what you just did, Kelly, right? It was the ability to go to an agent or an originator that you might be recruiting, by the way, because the process is very similar. To be able to go to that person and instead of saying, hey, Kelly, I know you're at this other company. You know, I see that you do $2 million a month in volume. I mean, let me tell you what these people hear when you recruit them cold call and you don't say anything that relates directly to their business. Hey, Kelly, I want the overrides off your volume. You're not saying it, but that's what they're hearing. But if I can go in and say, hey, Kelly, I noticed that you're working with Steve over at Keller Williams, and looks like you've been working with him for a while. But I also noticed that Steve, like 30% of his business is FHA and VA, and it doesn't look like you've been capturing that. I'm just curious, is that something that you're looking to add to your arsenal as you kind of go forward? Well, now all of a sudden you're thinking, wow, you're strategizing with me in a way that my own branch manager doesn't many times. Right. And then we can take it further and further. I love what you just said, because where we're always thinking is, how do you turn the numbers into outcomes? I don't want to just sell you a number and I don't give a crap what you do with that number. How does that number turn into a story that creates engagement, that gets you closer to conversion, that leads to another loan? Here's what's still happening though. And look, I'm really excited for where we are, and I'm actually excited for where the industry is, quite frankly, because I do think it's finally catching up a little bit, or at least realizing that it needs to catch up. I think that's why you're a little bit excited maybe and putting more energy behind this business and what you're doing with your company right now. But we're still in that spot where even though they know they need to make that investment, they're going to throw the decision back to the originator.
I mean, if not the originator,
a little bit of a tail wagging the dog thing still, right?
What it's so funny because, it made me think about the fact, like I had a very, very interesting seat. Okay. I was at the forefront of thinking about how marketing and sales and data and systems would collaborate. And I had kind of a blank canvas in order to do that, right? And so I was able to sort of A/B test not how a system works, but how people work with a system. But in 2016, when we rolled out data, I was pretty infamous for saying to the 2,000 people who were using the CRM, I love you, but data is an art and you are not an artist. And if I give you a data opportunity, like, hey, John Smith just put their house on the market, you're going to pick up the phone and go, hey, I heard you just put your house on the market. Let's talk about your next pre-approval. And how excited you are for them, except that his wife just died. You don't know that though, because you don't pay enough attention to your database. You don't pay enough. You aren't connected in social media. You don't have a true relationship with that person. So you literally sound like a stalker and you're totally out of touch. And so do me a favor, let me introduce the possibility of that to them without saying, hey, I'm super excited for you. Instead saying, my goal was always to find ways that we could use your equity to create wealth for you in the future. And I'm always keeping my eye on that. And I understand that you just put your house on the market. We should have a strategic conversation when you have time on what your next loan is going to look like, because as you know, I am very dedicated to my customers and always looking out for their best interest. That is a totally different way to use data than what you just did. And so the approach is so important when you're thinking about how to use data. when you're thinking about how to create an avatar of the human being that you're either trying to pitch or as a customer or as a realtor, whatever that is. Because going in, you should know a lot of things, but you should be able to deliver how you know them in a way that seems caring, in a way that doesn't seem stalker-like.
Well, it's a way that it shouldn't be a way that creates value for them and doesn't come across like it's only creating value for you and the commission that you might earn if you get the deal.
I mean, if we can change that mind shift around, I think that there has always been this positioning of the job as a whole of like, I am this altruistic being to you, and you come to me and I say, yes, I may bless you with the money. And they're like, thank you so much, mortgage person. And you're like, I have made your dream come true. I don't know that I ever really bought into that kind of thing.
Well, right? and I don't mean that. Like, okay. Ashley Terrell was on my podcast a couple months back, and we were talking about the NAR settlement. And one of the things that she was talking about that I loved, which was for the first time, agents have to understand how to communicate their value. Yes. Because now it's public. Now they know what they're paying for. They know how much you're making on that deal. So you have to understand to do what the loan officer has done for a long time, which is communicate your value. My point is, in the midst of them understanding your value, you do need to show them how you create value for them, not the other way around. To your point was, hey, I saw your house just got listed. Let's do a deal together. Versus what you just said, which is the reason why I'm making this phone call is because this relationship that we've had, or these other things that I'm noticing, and where I think I can help you ultimately have the outcome that you're looking for.
I just think that's where the pitch is. And you're absolutely correct. So my next door neighbor is one of my best friends, and she sold my house, right? But we were putting our house on the market in June. And I, of course, I'm on the other side of it where I'm understanding kind of where NAR's going to lead us and all these kind of things. And it was fascinating to go through not only the sale of our home, but to be her friend during that time, because I'm trying to explain exactly that, right? They are finally in this situation where they have to say, this is why you should pay me to give you the guidance that I can. Right. There's an enormous amount of value that a realtor brings. There's an enormous amount of value that a mortgage originator brings. But when the conversation doesn't include that, and I would argue a lot of them don't, even people who have what I consider pretty good marketing inside of mortgage, it's still very non-personal. Right? It's still very, so you want to do a refi, like here's why you do a refi. And, we don't think about it like, hey, as promised, I've been keeping an eye on you, and we're almost to the 3-year anniversary of your home. You're actually able to eliminate your PMI right now, which is going to be a huge game changer for you if you want to do a refinance. I've gone ahead and put together a mortgage coach for you so that you can see the impact of this change. And I would love to be able to talk to you about how we can put some more money either in your pocket, or we can, change the terms of this loan. So how about that? And what we currently kind of do, though, is we say, you should get a refinance. You should really get a refinance. It's like, let's save you money on your refinance. And so we constantly pitch without the personal. Yeah. And if you call me right now and you're trying to sell me something, and the way you're trying to sell me something is just to be like, do it. Right. Like, it's going to work out for you in the end. Of course, it's going to work out for me in the end. But how did you lean into the story of me, to the why?
One thing, I'm going to make a comment, and then I'm going to ask you 1 or 2 questions, then we'll break, so that our Pod-A-Palooza podcast doesn't go too long, and Fabi can get some value out of this. The last couple times I spoke at company events where a company, an enterprise, would have me come and speak. I am all about interaction and engagement. So I don't particularly like to just stand up there for 45 minutes and talk at a group of people. I try to do surveys, or at least even just open discussion and go back and forth. Both times there were 3 or 4 originators in the room that had done, I think it was at least 14 million in their first 12 months ever in the business. So these were young loan officers, not lead gen, not refi environment, nothing niche-y about the product that they were selling, and they did 14 million. However, the volume of the company was down. So on average, all of the originators in that room that were the top originators had done less volume than they had done in the previous 12 months. What makes me really excited were always those 3 or 4 people in the room, because when you ask them how they did it, it was really simple. It was they used data and market intelligence to engage with people that meet their criteria, but then use the data and market intelligence to tell a story. And then they follow a very consistent and predictable process of business development. That's it. It really was just that simple. They didn't confuse themselves with 3 different marketing platforms. They didn't confuse themselves with different POS. I mean, to your point, they picked their plan, they stuck to the plan, and they added 14 million in volume. And if you look at that, that's 14, in this case, let's call it 14 times 3 that was just in the room. But that's all that volume that didn't go to all these other people. And so it just sort of proves, right, that what's happening right now is still super valuable for the purchase-focused, self-sourced, transferable book of business originator. Okay, so table that.
Wait, can I say one thing?
Heck yeah, you can.
So I just had this conversation on Tuesday. And so we were talking about why it is that that particular group is good. And I will also argue why they will have a little bit of trouble, which I called can you scale beyond the sphere, right? So somebody new coming in, somebody young, they're at the age group where their friends and family are going to use them and lean in and this kind of thing. It's year 2 where they end up kind of running out of that sphere, right?
For sure. Yeah.
But to your point, so if you think about, let's say you've got a 27-year-old originator in year 1 who did 14 million, and all they did was really dial into a more systemized process where, we do the same thing for every single client and we serve everybody the same way. And I just have a process that I like and that is repeatable and that my ops team can count upon. Mm-hmm. If you go to 20, 30-year veteran, that person has now been through 17 coaches and 7 different companies and 14 different leaders who told them this. And they like this system, but they keep this old system just in case. And they also have this, but they don't want to learn this. And that is the fatigue I totally understand, because that's the way that we grew them, right? And that's been sort of the Achilles heel of the whole thing. And so there are people who are like, oh, we want to do consumer direct, or I just want to hire a bunch of, people under the age of 30 and who are going to, run these books and it's going to be great and we'll just give them leads and they'll close them. I get all the arguments, but I don't want to take our eye off the fact that there are these genius, wonderful loan officers who have themselves just kind of fatigued themselves and been fatigued by things. And you have these young, let's call them whippersnappers because I want to sound old, who approach the game in a very different way. And how do we make them both win? Because systems should be designed to support both of them in the same way. And process exists to make life easier for the loan officer, for the consumer, and for the ops people. But we have to get these people to believe that a process is not an evil. And we have to get these kids to believe and understand that life isn't always going to be easy and gravy because you got a sphere of people around you. There are going to be things that you got to do. And these people can really, really mentor those people. And I think that if we start having collaboration sort of between those age groups, you're going to find something really special.
No, for sure. So I'm watching college basketball last night, and I'm an ACC fan. And the ACC is getting their behinds handed to them by the SEC in the ACC-SEC Challenge. And it's very clear why. The SEC teams have acclimated to the new environment of a transfer portal and NIL, money that's being paid to these college players now.
Right.
The ACC is slow to react to those changes. I don't know why, but I tell you why I think, and I think this is a mortgage thing also. It's ego. It's ego. You think that the way that you used to be able to do it, the traditional blue blood way, can still work, or you can just dip your toe in the water and you can still win. But all of a sudden, these teams are getting beat up by grown men because they haven't decided to make that transition. It's like, don't hate the player, hate the game kind of thing, right? The game is changing. So I don't care if you're a 60-year-old LO that's been crushing it for a long, long time and now all of a sudden you're failing, or you're a brand new LO that thinks you can't learn anything from that 60-year-old LO. I agree with you that it's always somewhere in the middle of those two things. But here is a fact. it's not the way it used to be. Things have changed. And I think what you're saying in all of this is, as an individual contributor, you've got to pay attention, embrace, pick a system, and then be consistent to those systems. As an organization, same sort of thing. Maybe the challenge of due diligence and adoption might be a little bit different, but it's basically conceptually the same. Look, we've been going for about an hour, and we could keep going, but I don't know what the rules are for Pod-A-Palooza, so we're gonna kill the recording here, and then you and I could do a freaking podcast every month, quite frankly. Kelly, I'm really glad to know you, and I'm really glad that the industry has you as a voice. I don't think what you say is confrontational or arrogant or anything, quite frankly. I think it's just sometimes, as a commissioned based industry, whatever that industry is, it sure is nice when it was working the way it was working. And it's a whole lot easier to think that if I just wait a minute, things will come back around again. But those that wait are probably going to miss the wave that's coming up right behind them.
I've been referring to it as the DeLorean dream, right? If for those of us old enough to know what a DeLorean is and have watched Back to the Future, the thing about it is we can't keep waiting for 2018 and 19 to come jump back out at us. It's not going to happen. And that's okay. It's okay to say, this isn't a cycle. This is different. And I don't think acclimating to a new thing needs to be scary. You just need to have the right people that you trust. And if you've got those people and they're shoulder to shoulder with you in leadership, you got people in sales who are like, look, this has been a horrible few years. I want to contribute to how we grow and move forward. And what you think and what we all think collaboratively is we want to be the best. And whatever that takes, we should do. If you've got that kind of organization and that kind of energy, that's what you need. And you're going to crush it in 25 if you've got that kind of organization. But if you don't, that's okay too. But just put your thinking cap on when it comes to how you're going to approach things in January and figure out a way to make it not scary, to grow and be different.
Drop the mic. Kelly Yale, thank you for hanging out with me on the Walk podcast in a special Pod-A-Palooza edition. Since you took over the controls of the tech, I'm going to let you kill the recording, and then you and I can maybe talk for a few minutes after.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, friend. I really did enjoy it.
Yep, you're the best.